Please stand. Okay, be seated, please.
Let's sing Paradise Valley together. As I travel this life with its trouble and strife, I've a glorious hope to give cheer on, though soon my soul will be o'er, and then rest on that shore where the night has been turned into day. Up and up in the beautiful Paradise Valley by the side of the river of life. Up and up in the valley, the wonderful valley, from all pain and all strife. There will rest in the rose-tinted garden by the night of the evergreen tree. How I long for the Paradise Valley, where the beauty of heaven I'll see. Though your garden is rare, it is not to compare with the flowers that bloom in the garden above. In the midst of it grows Sharon's perfect sweet rose. 'Tis the wonderful flower we love. Up and up in the beautiful Paradise Valley by the side of the river of life. Up and up in the valley, the wonderful valley will be free from all pain and all strife. There we shall live in the rose-tinted garden, neath the shade of the evergreen tree. How I long for the Paradise Valley, where the beauty of heaven I'll see.
Bobby Joe Walker, 86, of Cabot, passed away Saturday, April 19, 2025. He was born July 24, 1938 in Valonia to the late Archie and Betty Ferguson Walker. Bob was a member of the Cabot Church of Christ and was a truck driver for 40-plus years. After high school, he attended Harding College for 1 year and then moved to Northern California to work in the logging industry. He then attended Heavy Equipment Operator School in Idaho, and following that, he went to Fort Wayne, Indiana to attend truck driving school at North America Van Lines in 1963. Bob retired in 2017 with an estimated 4 million miles logged without an accident. To me, that is amazing. 4 million miles without an accident in his career. On a trip early in his career, he stopped in Wichita, Kansas to attend church. and met Lina Lee Corner, who became his wife in 1964. As a newlywed, he operated a gas station, but soon returned to trucking. In the late 70s, he built 4 houses in the Cabot area, doing most of the work himself, including the carpentry. He then returned in trucking to 1979 for the rest of his career. Bob enjoyed photographing the landscape and wildlife along his travels. He was a lifelong learner, an avid reader, and enjoyed cooking and baking. He was good with children. He intentionally kept in touch with family and friends in person or over the phone, especially when he was out on the road. He always enjoyed yard work and mowing and continued his lifelong willingness to take care of and help people whenever he could. In addition to his parents, Bob was preceded in death by his sister Marilyn Watson and her husband Bailey, nephew Jerry Walker, and sister-in-law Martha Heffington Walker. Bob is survived by his wife of 60 years, Lina Corner Walker. Children, Brent Walker of Cabot, Lori Price, husband Brian of Austin, and Carl Walker and wife Cheryl of Judsonia, brother Don Walker of Cabot, and stepson Gavin Price of Jacksonville, along with several nephews and nieces. Yesterday evening at the Moores Cabot Funeral Home, there was a period of visitation from 6 to 8. Today, a funeral service which began at 2 p.m. at the Cabot Church of Christ with Brother Chuck Ball officiating, and burial will follow at the Cypress Valley Cemetery in Bologna, Arkansas.
When my way groweth drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call, hold my hand lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, and I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
Dad was born on July 24th, 1938. He started life on a 160-acre farm near Bologna. They grew different kinds of crops, but mainly they had a dairy. Dad grew up to be very strong, carrying 100-pound bags of feed over his shoulder. He graduated high school in 1956 with a class of 29 students. After high school, he had various jobs working for Kroger, Timex, and the VA. He then went to Harding. Don't know what he was going to major in. We always said he majored in ping pong and minored in poker. That's what he played the most. He only lasted a year. He was taking too many hard courses. And he met a couple of brothers from Northern California, Walt Jr. and Wayne Evans. When he quit Harding, he went with them to their home near Redding and worked in the logging woods. He worked some of the time in the woods and some of the time in a sawmill. One day while walking past the running saw blades, a chain broke loose, got caught in the blades, and ended up in a heap near where he was walking. Had he been a little closer, he probably would have been killed. After his experiences in the logging industry, he and the one brother, Wayne, went to that heavy equipment school in Idaho. Wayne found work after they were done with schooling, but Dad couldn't. So then he decided to go to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and become a truck driver. He went to the school for North American Van Lines. I'll never forget what one of his instructors said. It was impossible for a truck driver to drive 1,000,000 miles in his lifetime. When Dad retired from driving in 2017, he did a quick estimate of how many miles he had driven. He figured it was around 4 million miles, maybe over, and with averaging over 100,000 miles a year for nearly 46 years. One time he hit a goose, which bent his front bumper back several inches, which I was kind of surprised. That's a big, heavy, sturdy truck bumper. And another time, a lady backed all the way across a parking area at an apartment complex and backed into his trailer. Now, why she couldn't made a turn before, I don't know. And there was another time when a person stopped in the middle of the freeway and then got off the freeway at the exit. That caused the person in front of Dad and him to slam on the brakes, and fortunately he didn't do too much damage to that car in front of him, but they couldn't catch the person that caused it, and he was long gone. On one of his trips with North American, he was in Wichita, Kansas. And what he would do every Sunday morning, no matter what part of the country he was in, he'd look in the telephone directory for the nearest Church of Christ and go to it. Well, this particular Sunday, he found the one on West Douglas. Well, he knew West Douglas because that was the main road through Wichita. Had he known there was a Church of Christ 2 blocks away from where his agent was, had he gone to that one, he would never have met Mom. And so anyway, Dad went to the services that morning, met Mom, and then he showed up again later that evening. And when they came out of the building after service was over, Mom said, "Is that your truck?" He said, "Yeah." "You want to go for a ride?" "Sure." So they got in it, rode to the other end of town, ate at a little diner, and on the way back, they got pulled over by the cops. Dad was driving without his trailer, which was against some probably city ordinance, and you're not supposed to do that. Don't know if he got a ticket. Didn't say anything about that. Within a year, on October 31st, 1964, they were married. Dad owned a filling station about the time I was born on October 21st, 1967. They had gas wars, so Dad couldn't make a lot of money. Mom said that gas was about 25 cents when I was born, and with the gas wars, it might have gone down 19 cents. But then he went to driving truck for a couple of local companies. And when my sister was born in 1970, Dad said that's all he wanted, just 2 children. Well, somebody made a mistake, and my little brother was born a year later. Well, in 1972. So Dad decided to fix that problem. He was going to go in and have the snip. When he came home, of course, he's in pain. He lays down on the bed. Well, the way the living room, it was like this, and the master bedroom was like this. My little sister decided to greet Dad. So she comes running in the bedroom, jumps up on the bed, and lands right on Dad. If he wasn't hurting before, he was hurting now. So anyway, after those two local companies, he then went to drive for Coleman Camping Gear. It was great for him because they ran doubles, one driver sleeping in the bunk, the other driver driving. And they would head out on Monday morning and then come back Thursday. So he was home Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And this was every week. And they say that the first 5 years of a child's development are the most important. Dad was home for all three of his kids for at least the first 5 years. Not many people know this, but while he was driving for Coleman, he saved the lives of several people. On one of his trips west, he was going over a mountain pass in Colorado, 2-lane highway, and a gal in a station wagon full of kids, they were probably going to a birthday party, whipped out and passed Dad. And either because an oncoming vehicle was coming, we don't know. But when she whipped over in front of Dad, she started fishtailing. Well, it was everything Dad could do to stand on the brakes and not hit her. Because if he'd hit her, he would have pushed her off the road and down the side of the mountain, and all lives would have been lost. He said when he got down to the bottom of the mountain, he got the truck stopped and got out on the ground, and his legs were like jelly. He just couldn't stand, so he held on to the side of the truck to steady himself. Now, one of the bad things about that was the other driver was still in the bunk. And what they had was a leather curtain in between the bunk and the cab and a zipper. Well, the force of him standing on those brakes threw that other driver up against the curtain, and there was nothing he could do. He couldn't unzip it. He couldn't move. And so when Dad got it stopped, he was wondering, like, what in the world happened? And, of course, he could zip and look out. There was nothing. So Dad, of course, had to tell him what happened. Dad drove for Coleman from 1970 to 1975. When he left, he was the number 2 driver, saying the number 1 driver wouldn't ever quit, so he could become number 1. He then moved the family out to Woodland Park, Colorado, and he was going to start building houses. We moved out in September of 75. But by the time he got a school loan in December, there was 2 foot of snow on the ground, so he couldn't build a house. But since I was in 2nd grade at the time, I remember every weekend we went on a small trip somewhere in Colorado. And it's a beautiful state. I think Dad really loved it, and I love it. I think it's the most beautiful state in the country. But we then moved to Arkansas, and in the late 70s, Dad built 4 houses around the Cabot area. But that was during the Carter administration when the double-digit inflation. So Dad went back to truck driving. That was the only job he could make money at. First year, he hauled heavy equipment, and then later he hauled produce for a year and a half. After that, he went back to household goods moving with Wheaton Van Lines in 1981, and then to United Van Lines in 1991. Then in the 2000s, he drove for various freight companies until he retired in 2018. If he hadn't picked up there, if he didn't deliver there, he went through there. He's been everywhere, man. He's been to all 48 continuous states and Hawaii, never Alaska. The year after Mom and Dad were married, Mom's older brother, Rod, was stationed in Hawaii. And so they invited Mom and Dad to come down for about a week and a half, roughly. They took lots of pictures, 10 rolls worth. And when they came home, they sent in all the rolls at once and didn't get one back because they either got lost in the mail or had a lab fire. During the late 70s, after he got done building houses and decided to go back to trucking, he thought about driving truck for the Alaska pipeline, but decided against it. He would have gained his last state. On one of his hunting trips with the Evanses in the early 60s, they ended up in the northeastern corner of California on a particular mountain. During the day, they could see the southern part of Oregon and look over to the east and see the western part of Nevada. That night around a campfire, they were getting ready for bed when all of a sudden there was an eerie red glow to all the trees and everything. And it didn't just come on and off. It lasted for several minutes. Dad believes, and I believe this too, that they were doing a test over in Nevada and set off a nuclear bomb. That would have been a sight to see. In another one of the pictures that some of you might have been able to see last night in the picture roll, he's lounging on a float in a swimming pool. After he unloaded a rather well-to-do family whose furniture took up his whole trailer, they invited him to dinner and a swim in their pool. And that's some of the tips that Dad got for delivering people. One of Dad's favorite things to do was reading. He was a voracious reader. Sometime after high school, he bought a set of Britannica encyclopedias, the big thick ones. I believe he probably read the whole set because he could read really fast. He loved learning and learning about new things. His favorite 3 magazines were the National Geographic, Popular Science, and Mom's subscription to Reader's Digest. His favorite author was Tom Clancy. He also liked politics and keeping up with current events, watching or listening to Fox when he could on the TV or his iPad or the radio in the truck when he was going down the road. He loved taking pictures with his Minolta camera and viewing them on a slide projector. He also loved telling jokes, especially blonde jokes, although he himself was a cotton-top blonde. He loved the joke I told him about why blonde jokes were so short, so brunettes could remember them. The best blonde joke he ever told was the one about the blonde who always wanted to ride a horse. She finally got her chance. She put one foot in the stirrup, and just as she was putting the other foot over the saddle, the horse takes off. She's got one arm around the neck and one hand on the mane. The horse now breaks into a gallop. Well, now all she can do is hold on for dear life with everything she got. Well, the horse then breaks into a dead run. She can't hold on any longer and falls off. But her left foot is still caught in the stirrup. She's now being dragged over the ground, being scraped up by the rocks, the brambles, and the stickers. Walmart manager comes out and unplugs the horse. I went with Dad for 12 summers and most of 1 year. It was one of the best educations I ever received. It was a working vacation, and whenever we had a chance or a weekend that we weren't doing anything, we'd unhook the trailer, or we might rent a car and go see the sights. I have many memories and experiences. One of them was up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We got out to the shipper's house one night in the early 80s or 90s, not sure which. Dad on occasion would see what the shipment involved with the pickup, what kind of furniture and how much we would be loading the next day. When we were done, we asked the shipper if we could spend the night in our truck in their driveway, and it was a rather long driveway. And they said, sure, that would be fine. I didn't always sleep in the truck with Dad. A lot of the time, I'd sleep in the trailer on furniture pads. Made a great bed. I'd lock the door on the outside and strap it shut on the inside so no one could get in at me. After I made my bed that night, something caught my eye in the sky before I shut the door. I studied it for a while and couldn't figure it out. It looked like individual ghosts dancing in the sky, and they were a pale blue. I got Dad out of the truck and asked him what they were. He said it was the Northern Lights. I'd seen pics of Northern Lights before, but nothing like this. We must have been out there looking at them for about an hour or so. One of my other experiences took place in the summer of '83 down in Houston. Now this, I don't think it ever happened with Dad by himself. It definitely never happened with me. We were going to make 3 pickups in one day. Now they were all apartment sized, so, they weren't real big and they wouldn't take too long to load, but still 3 in one day. You also got to consider driving time in between. So we get out to the first pickup and the shipper wasn't there. We tried calling the agency to see if they had a number, still couldn't get a hold of them. So, couldn't load that one, so we went out to the second one. And that one was an apartment size, but also had a vehicle. And we hauled vehicles every once in a while. What we would do is put walkboards at the end of the truck, drive the vehicle up inside the trailer, then move the walkboards up front to the deck that was about 2 feet higher than the rest of the trailer. And so we put the vehicle up there. Dad usually would remember to put a bar back behind the wheels to keep it from coming off the deck. He didn't do it this time. So we put a deck above the vehicle, and that's where we were able to put all their furniture in boxes. And so then when we were done, and then what we would also do is strap that stuff in so it wouldn't fall off. We got out to the last pickup, and I would get the truck ready for us loading. And when I opened the door, I saw something that didn't look right. That vehicle had come off the deck and was now like this in the trailer. Well, we couldn't load up against that now. So with all the furniture from that last delivery, we just floated it on the trailer all the way to the back doors. And then that night, we found a parking area near a grocery store that was closed for the night. And we spent the rest of the night jacking up that vehicle on pieces of wood that Dad had. And then we'd have two by fours that would run across to the deck, and then we'd push the vehicle onto the deck. Well, the first time we tried, it came off our jacked up wood. So then we had to do it again. And finally, when we got it up on the deck, Dad put that bar across to keep it from moving anymore. It was probably about midnight when we got done, and we were so bone tired. Well, the only place I could make my bed was back near one of the doors because furniture was around the rest of that area. So I got the door strapped, I made my bed, and started going to sleep. Well, about half an hour later, it started raining, and it was coming through the crack at the top of the door on me. Luckily, it wasn't a gully drencher, but anyway, I still got a little wet. Half an hour after that, it started hailing. And I thought at any minute a hail was going to come through that crack and hit me on the head, but never did because the crack wasn't big enough. Anyway, ended up going to sleep, got up the next morning and started heading to Dallas. And along the way in northern Houston, we could tell there'd been a little wind damage, but, limbs and signs. It wasn't anything too major. We got up to a restaurant about halfway in between Houston and Dallas and stopped at a little restaurant that was great for, Dad loved the barbecue there. So as we're approaching the restaurant, there was a newspaper box. The headline on it said, 3 tornadoes go through Houston last night, 3 people killed. And we slept through that, and we didn't really care if there were tornadoes in the area. We were so tired. Dad taught me a lot of things that I'll never forget. One was if you take on a job, always do your best while working at it and always complete it. Be courteous to others and help others when you can. It was nice for me to go with Dad when I could, so he wasn't alone all the time. He figured that one year in the 80s, he was home 20 days out of the whole year. Most years he was home more than that. Sometimes he would just take off a week or several weeks to be home because he was, pretty lonely for the family. One Sunday morning before church started, and this wasn't too awfully long ago, it might have been about 7 or 8 years ago, he came home at 8 and left out at 9. He was in a hurry. Driving in one day, 300 miles for most people is about all they want to do. Dad's just getting started. 600 to 800 miles in a day would be a good day for him. When hauling produce, you were always late. The produce was due the day before at the destination, before you even picked it up. He drove on one trip in 1980, 1,900 miles in 2 days. I know that wasn't legal, but he didn't get caught. And he didn't get much sleep hauling produce. And that was one thing he always wanted, was his sleep. So that's why he didn't last long at that. Dad had a lot of experiences that we'll never know about, and a lot he couldn't possibly remember. One thing I'll never forget, whenever Dad was about to leave, he'd go out and work on his logbooks in the truck. When he was done, Mom would climb up to him and they would kiss and hug each other every time. He loved Mom and he loved his family. I would always shake his hand, but I could never get my hand around his because his fingers were so big and thick. But I'd do my best. And of course, if Lori and Carl were ever home when he left, they would give him the same send-off too. One thing I got to tell you about a winter story that happened back many years ago. He got on I-70 in Lawrence, Kansas. Middle of the winter, snow on the ground everywhere, and snow on the roadway. He gets on the freeway and starts going down, and all of a sudden he starts looking around. There's no traffic going with him or even ahead of him or behind, and there's no traffic going down the other way. That's kind of odd. But he keeps going, and at a truck stop in western Kansas at Hayes, he pulls off and he starts talking with another truck driver about that and saying, man, it was great. I didn't have to worry about anybody hitting me or me hitting them. The other truck driver looked at him and said, there's a reason for that. They closed the freeway. Evidently, Dad had got on right when they closed it, because usually they have barricades so you can't get on. But then after Dad would leave, I would stand at the end of the drive and watch him leave. If he was headed west on campground, he popped over the big hill, and that was it. But if he was headed east, it took a while longer because there were 3 little hills. And I could see him go down and up and down and up. And then finally, the 3rd hill, he was gone. Well, he's left us again, but this time he won't be coming back.
God sent his Son, they called him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know just because he lives. And then one day I'll cross the river, I'll fight life's fight, no war with pain. And then as death gives way to victory, I'll see the lights of glory, and I'll know he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he knows the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives.
Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you supporting us, all the love, all the prayers. It's been a hard time, but it's been a good time, and all the memories that we get to share. And for the family, we want to thank all the close family, our immediate family, but it hasn't been free of stress, but it's been free of drama. So we have enjoyed that. And I really want to thank my wife, Cheryl. She's been big support to me through this time, and I can't imagine going through it without her. One of the things she was doing before my dad passed, and has continued to do, was to share a joke with me in the morning. She has a little calendar, so she would read that to me, and she kept doing that. And that helped. So I'm going to tell a few little jokes here, but the good thing, they're not Dad's jokes. These are short jokes. So he liked the long kind, but I'm going to do short ones. So, tea bags are going up in price. Anger is brewing all across the nation. I suffer from CDO. It's kind of like OCD. It's an alphabetical order, though. A century ago, there were two brothers, and they believed that it was possible for us to fly. And, of course, they were right. Yeah, there's some of those jokes. So you've heard Brent's history. You've heard a lot about my dad, a lot of the things that he could do. He was a farm boy, lumberjack, mechanic, truck driver, carpenter, chef, bookworm, card player, lifelong learner. But of all the things that I think he was a storyteller to me. A gift that I did not inherit and something I've never excelled at, but in honor of him, I'm going to tell some stories. And I think that would also honor him. We're going to take a little bit of time, hopefully not too much time. I'll try to go as fast as I can, so hold on. We're gonna get through this. But anyway, that would honor him, because most of you who knew him, you could attest to the fact that it wasn't hard to get him into a storytelling mood, and it usually took some time to do that. Us three kids grew up after church. We would sit out in the car, and we would listen to Casey Kasem count down the top 40 while Mom and Dad strove to be the last man or woman standing at church. And it was kind of rare when they came out and there wasn't more cars in the parking lot. But anyway, that was fun times. So I'm going to tell some stories, talk about my father. But when I'm going to do that, I want you all who knew him to think about those stories that he told you. He told a lot of stories. And I know that he's told some stories that I have not heard, because he was still doing that the last time that I saw him. We went over to the house and he was telling us stories. Brent mentioned that he went to heavy equipment operator school. He couldn't remember exactly where. So out there in the foyer, you can see a picture of him. He's got an atlas, and he's looking at it, and he's looking up. He said he hadn't done that in a while. He's looking up where that was. It was Weiser, Idaho, if anybody cares, want to go look up. And that's last time I saw him looking at a map, and it was nice that we got to do that one last time. So I want to hear those stories that he told you, because I know he told some that I haven't heard, like I just said. You can call, write, text, email, you can get hold of us somehow, but I want to hear some of those stories, because I know there were so many. And I want to hear the stories about how he impacted your life. I've asked a few people to come up afterward. They're going to be a little more brief than me and Brent probably, but they're just going to tell a few stories because he loved telling stories. He would do it all the time. I had a glass of the best milk I've ever had today. It was legendary. Okay, so who was my dad? To me, basically this is my history. Brent's told you the official history, so I was the young one. I can't remember anything. So, as a kid, he was tough. You didn't want to mess with him, but he was also a bit of a Renaissance man. He read all kinds of things. He could do all kinds of things. There was a John Wayne-ness about him. He wore boots a lot. He didn't wear the rest, the cowboy hat and all that. That wasn't him, but he wore boots. He was a product of that era, and it's a way of treating others and your family and stuff. I would describe it as don't tell kids how to live, show them. But although he wasn't that expressive a lot of the time, he also wasn't the typical tough guy either. For one, he loved to cook. Brent mentioned that a little. And he would experiment in the kitchen. You usually didn't expect to see a big burly truck driver whipping up a custard. And I'm convinced that the recent egg shortage that we've experienced is because Dad used 6 eggs in each one, and he kept making them over and over. He was trying to get that consistency just right and the taste just right. And then he liked to experiment and put different flavors. And so there was custard after custard after custard. And he ate a lot of those by himself, but he would offer them to us, and we would eat some. But he just kept making. The other thing he made so many different things. Not going to go into all of them. The other one was sourdough bread. And that was my favorite bread. And his was sourdough to me. It was a little sour maybe for some people. It was maybe a little dense for people. But that was really sourdough to me. And by the way, bread puns, they happen when you yeast expect them. So another thing he loved was children. They loved him. When we'd go visit family, we remember our cousins asking if Uncle Bob was coming. And if he was, they would scream, "Uncle Bob!" as they ran to him. And I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty convinced that they like playing with Uncle Bob more than they like playing with us, mostly. And no hard feelings, because I was right there too. When he came home from the long trip, I would run out to him, and he would drop whatever he was holding, and he'd throw me up in the air. He did all kinds of things. He'd put your head on the ceiling. How many kids get their head on the ceiling? You get to see it from a whole new perspective up there. I would lay down on the floor. He would pick me up by the ankles and put my feet on the ceiling, and then I'd say, "Make me walk." He'd make me walk across the ceiling. How many kids get to walk on their ceiling? It was unique. But yeah, he did so many things, swinging and throwing. So I know that he had to have sent some parents into cardiac arrest almost with all the swinging and throwing around. But as a kid at the right age, there was no amusement park that could beat my dad. He was the best. My dad used to say that when one door closes, another opens. He was a terrible cabinet maker. Now, I have to say that was a joke. Now, he actually did, as in the obituary you heard, he made all the cabinetry for his houses, and he would not stand for the doors opening when another closed. So, yeah, he did a good job. So, to us kids, he was like Superman a lot. And Lori told this to me. I wasn't old enough to know. But when he was driving for Coleman, he was gone 4 days and then home 3. And Lori was 4 or 5 years old. So when he was gone, she started getting nightmares. It was bad. She had to go sleep with Mom. But when Dad would come home, there wasn't a problem. It's as if just his presence in the house kept the monsters away. And that was a special one. Another example of his Superman quality, we got a call earlier this week from my Uncle Fred, which we love to hear from Uncle Fred. Got a few of his brothers here with us, so he wasn't able to make it. But he told us about Dad helping him partition their basement in the house that they've lived in now for 55 years. Now, he originally said 54, and the only reason I point that out is because he's a retired accountant. You've got to give them a hard time when they mess up numbers. So his brothers would appreciate that. I knew. There was a 2x4 in that basement that he had to get up and need to go overhead. And he had pecked away at it trying to get it up there. But it was at a bad angle. It was hard to get to. He could not get it up there. He said that Dad just grabbed a hammer and flicked his wrist, and that nail was all the way in the board. Now, and we remember this. So Lori mentioned this, and we all remember that Dad was like a human nail gun. He could just hit it. He would set it, one tap, get it there, and then bam, all the way down. And I remember from when I was young, growing up, they were in school, and I was at home running around, at the houses he was building, running around. And Dad could go down a board. He tap, boom, tap, boom, tap, boom. So I'm pretty convinced that he could have done a John Henry. Could have somebody with a nail gun and him, and he'd give them a run for their money. He was good with a nail gun. But anyway, Uncle Fred, he was completely stunned. And so he said that he has forgotten a lot of things in his life, but that sheer display of skill and power is something that he will never forget. Another one. I don't know if this one is more Superman or Dr. Bob, but Johnny reminded me of this last night, actually, and I'd kind of forgotten this. But one time, the only time that Johnny, he was my cousin, who's closest to me in age on the Walker side, the only time that he got a ride with my dad was the summer when he graduated from high school. And I went with him, so it was me and Johnny and my dad. We went up to the Northeast. And so before we left, Johnny had hurt his knee just a little bit. So he was a little worried about that, but he went ahead and went on the trip. So we went up, and he did pretty good. We got up to Vermont, I think it was, way up in the Northeast. It's about the furthest away from home we got on that trip. And that's when we were going to switch from the front. We liked to, we'd switch off. There was only one seat up in the front for the passenger, and we'd switch. So he gets up to switch and twists, and his knee pops out. Excruciating pain, of course, you can imagine. And Dad reaches over, said, "Brace yourself, it's going to hurt." But he just popped that knee back into socket. And I'm sure it hurt some, immediately, of course. And it may have hurt a little bit after, but he made it through the rest of that trip. And so I'd forgotten Dr. Bob. So my dad wasn't always Superman. He also had a mischievous streak. People will attest that I have inherited that a little bit. And my dad's brother Don can attest to this. He had a story. When he was 10 and Dad was 14, they were on the dairy farm. And Marilyn, the middle sisters, the middle sibling, she's the only sister. So she and Mom had gone to town. They were going to buy groceries or something. So they were gone. It was just Dad and Don at home. And a rain came up. And Don liked to get his short-legged pants on and go play out in the rain. He's down by the dairy farm, and Dad sees him down there. Dad doesn't have any short-legged pants. I guess he thought Don didn't need any either. So he takes his pants off, takes Don's pants off, and throws them up on the dairy barn. Well, that wasn't a very nice thing to do. And what does he do about it? Well, Dad's a lot bigger than Don was. So he decided, I'm just going to go get my pants back. So he's going to crawl up on that roof, and it had been raining, so that tin roof's a little bit wet, and he goes for a slide. And I don't know all the things going through his 10-year-old mind as he's sliding down that barn, but one of the things was that at the edge of that barn at the bottom was a barbed wire fence, and he's sliding towards it. And he's thinking he's coming off this roof, and he may be hitting it, and he doesn't have his pants on. So you can imagine there's a little bit of terror there is what's going to happen. But fortunately, he's flying along at a fast enough speed. He cleared the fence and landed and didn't break anything. And most importantly, he got his pants back. So, fortunate for that. Since we're talking about a farm, scarecrows, they love their job. Scarecrow's always saying this job isn't for everyone, but hey, it's in my genes. Okay. So now we get to a little more personal part. So to be honest, before he passed, I tended to think a lot more about what my dad didn't teach me. I'd heard all of these stories. I've heard so many things about all the things he could do. And sometimes I wondered a lot about why he didn't try to teach me more of those things. I never got a definitive answer about that. But I have come to the conclusion that it was because, for the most part, he learned how to do most of the things that he did. He did go to school for various things, but he was a self-taught, a self-learned person. And if he couldn't figure it out, then if he could figure things out, then why couldn't I figure out things? And I've learned a lot from that. It wasn't how he was raised either. He talks about how he wanted to learn how his mom cooked a lot of the things that she cooked. She was a great cook, but she couldn't explain how she did it. She just did it. So, yeah, that was part of how he grew up. So we just had to learn how to do things too. So even though I used to think a lot more about what he didn't teach me, now it's becoming a whole lot more clear to me after this. You go through a lot of introspection these times. How many things that he did teach me. So I'm going to share a few. I plan on reading a book about torches at some point. A little light reading before bed. So because of my dad, I love photography. He had a Minolta with a tripod, telephoto, the whole 9 yards. He got the whole pack. I remember going to Blanchard Springs when I was little. We went on the tour. Of course, the tour's moving on, all the people. He's back there with the tripod, and he's taking the time exposure, and he was that kind of dad sometimes. I worked with technology because of my dad. He came home in the early 80s, I don't remember the exact year, with a Commodore 64. And he wasn't planning to do anything with it. I remember Mom's reaction was, "What are we going to do with this?" Well, he had read a lot about computers at the time. He knew they could do a lot. So he gave it to us, the manual, and Brent grabbed that. He went through it, and he found a program to do. He's going to type in that program from the manual. I don't know how long he spent typing that in. It was a lot to type in. He types the whole thing in there, pushes enter, bang. It was a gunshot. He typed all of this stuff in for a gunshot. I think he didn't pursue programming maybe because of all of that work for the little bitty payoff. I didn't ever try that. I was amazed that he spent that long doing that. So I waited until we could load games on the disk drive and all of that, and then I could play, and it just went from there. But it was all because my dad brought home an unexpected computer that we didn't ask for. He's just interested in technology. So that's why I like technology, one reason. I also like hiking and camping. It's because of my dad, but I'm a little sore about this one because you'll see these pictures. You might have seen the slideshow. Out front they have some. They're all hiking around. I'm in the backpack. If they did let me down, I was too young to remember it. And by the time I was old enough to remember, they never went hiking anymore. And I remember one time camping in Greer's Ferry, but that was it. So I've since then married my wife. We go hiking all the time. We go camping. We go out to all the national parks. And that's another thing I got from my dad. He liked the national parks, so we've seen a lot of them. Some big things that I learned from my dad. I was proud to announce when I was growing up that I didn't drink, smoke, do drugs. That's because my dad didn't do those things. I don't even take Tylenol. He taught me to respect God. And probably some other guys can appreciate this. I learned one way of respecting God was those brain dusters on the back of the pew. That was one way. A love of driving on the open road and appreciating the scenery wherever you are. There's always something out there to see if you're looking for it. My dad could be a little bit frustrating to drive with at times. We'd be driving along, it'd be quiet, nobody's saying anything. Suddenly he'd say, how many antelope you've seen? Antelope? Where's antelope? He laughs. Say, we passed 20 in the last mile. You say, do you see any now? Looking all over. He laughs again. Look in the rearview mirror. The one that we just passed was right beside the road. That stuff would happen. And since I'm telling jokes about eyes, the cornier the better. When we lived briefly in Jacksonville, one of my only memories from there was going to church one Sunday morning and needing someone to tie my shoe. I was young at that age, like 4, 3. And usually Mom or Brent or maybe Lori would tie my shoe for me. This Sunday, though, he had them all go out. He said, "I'll be out in just a second." He sat me down there in the entryway, and he went to tie my shoe and show me how to do it. He tied it once, showed me. He undid it and said, "Okay, see if you can do it." I don't think I got it the first time. He did it again. Tried again. And he stayed there patiently, waiting, family waiting outside, church maybe going to be late for it, but he took patience with me, and I got my shoe tied. And that taught me something important about training. If you don't know, I'm a technology trainer now. That's because my dad taught me how to be patient with people, and patience is one of the most important things I consider in my job. If you have patience with people, it can go a long way. It's because of my dad that I had the confidence that I can learn anything and set my mind to, and because of him, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. And I have dabbled in woodworking, mechanical, electrical, but while I don't know that much about any of those, I know that I can figure things out because I had a dad that could figure things out. And growing up, my mom would always just say, "Wait till your dad gets home, he'll fix it." I grew up to try to be that kind of kind of guy. I don't have children, but the kind of guy who could fix things. So I've come to the conclusion that we shouldn't say, "I can't do that. I'm not made that way. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not good enough." My dad could do most things he set his mind to, and because of that, I've discovered that I'm still learning how fearfully and wonderfully we are made. I want to share just a few more, so skip a little there. Down to my perspective here. Okay. This is my perspective on death that I want to share. Final. When I was 6, my dad went back to driving a truck. I don't remember being sad. Like Brent said, he was there for us in our developing years when we were young. I'm sure there was some adjustment there that I don't remember. I was pretty young. I was 6. But whatever happened at that young age, what I remember is peace and confidence that my dad was out on an adventure and he would be coming back to bring us things and tell us about those adventures, which he did a lot. Important thing is, he always did come back. In the summers, we would go with him. So I had an idea of what that was like, a taste, and I identified with Hebrews 11:16, where it talks about desiring a better land, a heavenly one. Now, there's nothing wrong with Arkansas, despite what my uncles from Kansas say. It really is a beautiful state, and I definitely appreciate it more now than I did as a kid. I married someone from Arkansas. But in my mind, at the time, young kid, 6, 7, Arkansas represented this world. And the rest of the world was like heaven to me. It was the place you longed to go to. Every time we could go on a trip with Dad, we were going to that other place outside. We were going there. And so that developed my perspective at a young age, and it helped me to grow to appreciate there's beauty in God's creation everywhere you look, if you are looking for it. But it's like Paul describes in 1 Corinthians 13:12, that we see a dim reflection. It's just a taste of what heaven will be like while we're here on this earth. So whatever you experience that is good here on earth, it will be so much better there in heaven. So I remember not resenting my dad being on the road. Who wouldn't want to see all those amazing places and go all those places? At the same time that he was out on the road, I was also going to church. Like Brent mentioned, I learned from a young age that even when my dad was out on the road, if it was a Sunday, he was at church, wherever he was. I stand before you today because, like Brent mentioned too, he went on a Sunday while he was on the road going through Wichita, Kansas, and he met my mom at the West Douglas Church of Christ. You may have heard about, you definitely heard about the 4 million miles. That is amazing, but as amazing as it is, I would challenge missionary preachers to count more unique churches of Christ visited across the nation than he. Some of us can boast about going to most of the states in the U.S., but he can boast about going further. He visited a church in most of the states of the United States. So I had that example from my father. And as I went to church, I absorbed some of the verses that have impacted my life and my view of my dad being away, often for months at a time, and like mentioned, almost a year while I was growing up at times. So James 4:14, for you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. We often think about that verse in relation to the brevity of life, which is the context, but it is equally valid for anything you are facing in this life. What are a few months compared to eternity? What about a few years or a few eons? We can't even fathom what it would be like to exist for 1 billion years, but what is that to eternity? It's a blink of the eye, it's a drop in the bucket. Of course, how long I'm speaking is not a drop in the bucket. But conclusion, nothing really lasts that long in this life. And that affected my view of my dad being gone. 1 Thessalonians 4:12 through 13. Brothers and sisters, we do not want any of you to be uninformed about those things, about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. At a young age, this verse helped me put my dad being gone in a better perspective. There was no permanent separation. It was just for a little while. So why be sad? He taught me indirectly to be content, and there was no need for me to grieve. Combine these and other verses along with my dad's example helped me to form a solid foundation of faith that led me to conclude that when someone passes away, they just got a ticket to paradise. They were going on ahead, a grand vacation, and we would be happy to follow them. We might even be envious. And it'll be just a brief time before we see them again, if we are faithful. Mary actually said something very close to that last night at visitation, and I already had this written. But that was very much exactly what I was thinking. Okay, so skip to the end. 4 million miles of safe driving. You can't do that if you're consistently staring at the rearview mirror. My dad saw the world, but he kept it between the lines. The best advice that I can give you, that I learned from my father's example, is to get on the straight and narrow, keep it between the lines. I have faith and hope that my dad can't wait to tell you a joke or a story. I want to see you there, and I have faith and hope that he is waiting to see you there too. So let's do our best to keep it between the lines. I love you, Dad.
I didn't have the fortune of knowing Bob as long as many of you here. That's my loss. But in the last few years that Deb and I have moved here to Cabot, I got to know Bob, and he was just one of the most kindest, humble, gentle souls I've ever known. He reminded me a lot of my dad. My dad grew up on a Nebraska farm during the Great Depression, and they were tough as nails. They had to be to get through. And as I got to know Bob, it took a long time to just get the background story of who he was. I was just amazed at all the things he had done, and he was so humble. And you had to pull it out of him. Once he would share something about his driving and how many miles and states he had been through. And I know from my brother, my oldest brother was a trucker for many years. And he would tell me just the beating your body took from it, your joints, your back, your kidneys. And for him to do 4 million miles is just astounding. Amazing. But, it got to be that for me, worship was not complete until Bob and I found each other and said hi and get caught up on how we were doing. He was just that reliable and just that kindness he had. And he always was wearing that big smile of his and, just happy to be there and happy to see you. And I know it wasn't easy for him, all the physical things he was dealing with at the end, you know, with his hearing and all the carving they had to unfortunately do for his skin cancer. And he was just, you know, I'm going to miss him. Sorry. I appreciate what Carl shared. That, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing him again.
Thanks. Got it.
Well, because of our time in the Air Force, and well, we just weren't around that much. Like, you know, we weren't there when Bob and Lina got married. And but a few years after they got married, about 2 years after they got married, they decided to come to Hawaii. And we told them, well, we'll really be happy to have you visit us, but there's a little bit of a problem. Haleakala National Park on Maui has a reservation system because there's this caldera, I think they call it. That may not be technically right. But it's the top of an old dormant volcano that I think went off in 1790 the last time. But the caldera is about 10 miles long and about 5 miles wide, and they have 3 cabins that the National Park Service maintains. And you can reserve these, but it takes, I think, at least 6 months in advance, maybe longer than that. And we had a reservation, Barbara and I, with our neighbors, Jim and Jenny. And so we said, you know, we really can't cancel that reservation. Of course, you're welcome to stay at our house, but you're welcome to go with us if you want, because these cabins would house, I think, 12 people. And of course, Bob and Lina were happy to go. And so we get all of our gear together, and all of us had canteens, except, and something that Brent said, I think, about loading the heavy stuff helps me understand this a little bit more. Bob carried one of these. This was Bob's canteen. And I said, Bob, I don't remember, I don't know how much, 5 gallons, that's what this is, a 5-gallon container. I don't know how much it weighs, but it weighs a bunch. And he said, well, I drink a lot of water. And he did. He hauled that thing in addition to the other stuff in his backpack. And so we made it to the first cabin, no problem, the first night. One thing that's really strange, it was so dark up there. You're sort of on top of the world. The highest point of Haleakala is about 10,000 some feet. And so you're way above sea level and way above any kind of lights. It's just totally dark. And one of the things, we'd start giggling because we could hear people unzip and things like that. And but anyway, we get to the second cabin, and that was a sort of a short hike, so we get there fairly early in the afternoon, I think. Maybe even got there by noon. I don't know. We had a lot of time, and I had a map. And being in the intelligence business, I've developed a certain facility for reading maps. And I said, hey, here on this map, there's this trail that goes to the top. And I think this cabin's probably about, I'm just making some wild guesses now. This is 1964. But probably about 7,000 feet, and we're going to hike up to 10,000 feet. And we get up to the ridge, and I had looked at the map, and I saw where we could come back around the ridge and then come right down onto our cabin. And, you know, Barbara said, I'm not going to do that. and I think probably Lina said the same thing. I'm not going to do that. And so Bob and I decided, well, we'll do it. And he was all in. You know, he said, hey, Rod, you want to do it? I'm with you. And so we head around this ridge, and we're getting around quite a ways, but it became obvious that this trail was a lot more difficult than anything I thought it would be, and it's getting dark. And we finally decided we're not going to get back to that place where we just go right down to the cabin. We're going to have to, we're going to need to try to cut across and find the trail that we came up on, but it got totally dark. And we're up there stumbling around in the dark. Bob had this good sense, well, as already been brought out, he wore long pants. But I was wearing a pair of shorts, a t-shirt, and getting all scratched up. And we had almost reached the point where we thought we're just going to have to sit down, because we came to one place, we knew there was a chasm somewhere that we had to get across or go back up around. And I think maybe we had gotten around it, but we had no idea how much further it was to the trail, and we couldn't see anything in the dark. And we started hearing these voices. And Barbara and our neighbor Jim, who had a bad knee, I think, from a football injury, they had come up the trail, and they were yelling at us, and 2 or 3 different times, you know, they'd yell and get no response and head back down. And one time, though, we did hear them, and we yelled back, and they heard us. Anyway, so make a long story short, we got back down, and but I was all scratched up, but again, Bob, he'd been wearing long pants, so he's in pretty good shape. And Jenny, who had stayed behind, she had the honor of dabbing all of my sores with mercurochrome, and every time she'd hit one of them and I'd wince or yell, she'd say, good for you, you deserve it. And so anyway, so we get down, but then we made it to the third cabin all right the next day, and then hiked out the fourth day. But on the eastern end, I don't know how many of you have ever been to Maui or know anything about it, but there's a place on the east coast of Maui called Hana, and there's some beautiful waterfalls and pools, and we wanted to see those. And so we take off. We get out there, And they were beautiful. I'm sure Bob took a lot of pictures there. And Barbara and I, of course, well, no, Barbara wasn't taking pictures in those days, but I took a bunch. And, but when we got ready to come back, we thought, you know, it took us X number of hours to get here, and it was just a two-lane road, very windy, and we thought, we don't have that much time to get back to the airport. And so I asked Bob, would you like to drive? Because I knew he was a professional driver. And we made it. Now, I think all of us were a bit scared, except I suspect that Lina wasn't, because she's the kind of person that doesn't worry about anything. You know, she just knows everything's going to be fine. And but we made it back. And so that was my first exposure to Bob. I don't think we had not met him before then. And but it was a good trip, and we enjoyed that. The only other story I want to tell you, it involves my son Brad. And you've already heard a bunch about the heavy lifting and a lot of stuff like that in the trucking business. Brad was in high school, I think, and I suppose it must have been in the summer when Bob came through Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and he needed someone to help him unload a truck and maybe load. I'm not sure what all was involved, and while he's at our house, he asked Brad, he said, could I hire you to help me? I'll pay you $100. And you know, 1980 for a kid in high school, $100, that's a bunch of money. And so Brad said, yeah, I'll do that. And Brad went out, and Brad came back in that night. And we said, are you going out again with your Uncle Bob the next day? And he said, no, that's too much work. And because, you know, in the trucking business, as from what Brent told you a while ago, that it is hard work. And Brad he's a computer nerd. All he had ever done is sit in front of a computer and done not a whole lot of physical labor. So anyway, you know, Bob was a man who was always up to whatever needed to be done. And, you know, he helped bail me out getting back off of that mountain back to where we finally could see the flashlights from Barbara and Jim and get back to the cabin. And then he drove us back to the airport. And yeah, he just was always, we used to enjoy, he would come through when I was preaching in Yukon, I mean, not Yukon, when I was preaching in McKinney. He would come through every once in a while. We'd go out to eat. I think maybe he stayed overnight a couple of times. I think Lina came once or twice. And we just always enjoyed his company. But every year, Barbara and Bob were born the same day. You know, July 24th, 1938. And he'd call her and wish her happy birthday, and I think say you're getting to be an old lady or something like that. And she'd talk with him till he got up into Oklahoma somewhere and didn't have any more connection. And but even though we didn't begin to have the kind of contact that the rest of you had, we just saw him a few times. We were truly impressed with him, and we know that our sister made a really good choice.
Lina has 4 brothers. That was the senior one. Just then, I am the middle of the other 3. On the obituary, it mentioned that soon after they got married that he had a filling station in Wichita. And I worked for him as an 18-year-old. And one day, I was putting a tire back on a car, and I did not tighten the lug nuts as I should have. And whether it was that afternoon or the next day, the owner came in, and I destroyed the wheel. That was all my fault, 100% my fault. But Bob was gracious enough that he only made me pay half of it, and he paid the other half. Now, Lina, the statute of limitations has run out on that, so I don't owe you any money, okay? Just want to make sure on that. Although he did say, okay, Jim, no more wheels for you. You can pump gas. I don't think you can cause a whole lot of destruction out there. And so that was that. Lina, you will remember the Breckheisens at West Douglas. When I was about 11, one of my friends, his name was Deanie, and his older brother, Ronnie, was baptized, and afterwards, his mother was crying. And at that point in my life, I had not discovered tears of joy. I knew tears of the belt, because if you recall, Mom had a PhD in belt. And I really think I was innocent every time, but that's another story. And so I asked Mom, I said, Mom, why is Deanie's mother crying? Why is she sad that Ronnie's been baptized? And Mom tried to explain tears of joy, and she might as well have been talking about nuclear physics to me. Lina, I love you. And I don't mean to be mean. I'm happy for Bob right now. No more Walker. No more Kane. I would say he's running a marathon in paradise, but I think we will have a brain in paradise, and so he wouldn't be running a marathon. But he's probably doing some running. He's tossed his hearing aids. He has 20/20 ears, or whatever ears are when they're good. No more diabetes. I can see him right now eating 4 Reese's peanut butter cups and chasing it down with a large blizzard from DQ. Bob is where we want to be. In Philippians chapter 1, Paul says, I desire to depart and be with Christ, for it's far better. We do mourn with you, but we rejoice with Bob. You know well the old hymn, Does Jesus Care? The last verse says, does Jesus care when I've said goodbye to the dearest on earth to me? And my sad heart aches till it nearly breaks. Is it aught to him, does he see? And then the chorus says, oh yes, he cares. I know he cares. His heart is touched with my grief. When the days are weary, the long nights dreary, I know my Savior cares. When Mom died in 1965, one of the songs was, Be With Me, Lord. And just as the Lord has been with our mom since 1965, and obviously before, He's with Bob now. We will pray for you, we will love you, and we will rejoice with Bob. God bless you.
When peace like a
Attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well, with my soul, with my soul. It is well, with my soul. And Lord, taste the day when my days shall be sighed. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The drum shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul, with my soul. It is well with my soul.
Great stories, great thoughts. Heard some wonderful stories about Bob today, and I got to tell you, I enjoyed seeing him each Sunday and visiting with him each Sunday, and I would get a joke or I'd get a story most Sundays, but I would always get a kind word. And I think that's what stands out most to me about Bob Walker. Gatherings like this are difficult and even painful to some degree because it seems so final. But I want you to know, and I kind of echo what Jim said, today does not represent finality. There's nothing final about today. In fact, death is not final for the Christian. Death is a good thing for the Christian. A passage or two just above what you referred to in Philippians 1, Jim. In Philippians 1:21, Paul would say, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Death is a gain. Death is a positive. Well, it is for the one who dies in Christ. It is for the faithful Christian. John would say in Revelation 14 and verse 13, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord." And again, those of the world might say, how can the dead be blessed? well, they only are if they die in the Lord. So today is not final. Jesus, I love what he says in John 11:25 and 26, when he offers comfort to two sisters grieving the loss of a brother. And he said, I'm the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. It was, how do you wrap your mind around never dying because you have a relationship with Jesus? And it's because the faithful child of God passes at physical death from this life to our heavenly home, to eternal life. And that's what we live for. That's why we rejoice today. That's why we can rejoice today. That's why we can find comfort and peace even at a time such as this. Paul would say in 2 Timothy 4, nearing the end of his life, verses 6 and 8, he would say, I'm already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I fought the good fight, I finished the race, I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. And he speaks of this crown of righteousness. He's nearing death. He knows his physical life is coming to an end, and all he can think about is where he's going. The eternal life that lies ahead. And our comfort today is knowing that Bob has gone home. That Bob has gone home. He has lived his entire life to be where he is now. So much comfort in that. In an impure world in which we live today, I want to end with this. It's hard to wrap our mind around a perfect place or even a good place such as heaven. What will it be like? Is there such a place? Well, I assure you there is. And John gives us a glimpse in Revelation 7 of what this perfect place of heaven is like. In Revelation 7:13 and following, one of the elders addressed me saying, Who are these clothed in white robes, and from where have they come? And I said to him, Sir, you know. And he said to me, These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They've washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they're before the throne of God. They are in the presence of God, and they serve him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb, Jesus, in the midst of the throne, will be their shepherd, and will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. A perfect place with a perfect God and perfect provision and protection and living water with the Lamb of God, Jesus. That's where Bob is. And that's why we can find comfort and rejoice today. Family and friends, I think, and I say this a lot, I believe it with all of my heart, that memories are a gift from God. And I would encourage you, cherish those memories that you have of Bob and honor his godly legacy. We've heard many lessons today from his sons and even from his daughter through the sons. Cherish those memories. Honor his godly legacy and live your lives in a way so that you will be able to spend eternity with him in heaven someday. Let's pray. Our Father, we bow in your presence at this time, and we thank you, Father, for the greatest gift of all, and that's your Son Jesus and his death on the cross. Father, it's at times like this that we realize just how incredibly fortunate we are to have Jesus. Because today we can shed tears, but we can also rejoice because we know Bob is with you, and that is because of Jesus. Thank you for that. Thank you for the life that Bob lived, 86 years, a loving husband and father, the example that he lived for so many, the good stories that he told, the jokes that we won't forget. But Father, the greatest thing about Bob is that he was a faithful Christian man. We're most thankful for that. Thank you for that legacy. Be with his family, Father, and give them comfort and peace. And Father, may we see today as a day of rejoicing. We love you, Father. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
God be with you till we meet
By his counsels guide uphold you, with his sheep securely fold you. God be with you till we meet again. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet again. Till we meet at Jesus' feet. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet, till we meet again. God be with you till we meet again. God be with you till we meet again. Neath his wings securely hide you. Daily manna still provide you. God be with you till we meet again. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet again. Till we meet at Jesus' feet. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet, till we meet again. God